PowerPoint for produced pastry, right? So we've got a few things. We've got the puff pastry, which I want to demonstrate to you now. And then we've got the obviously the assessments on tomorrow. This is Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday group will do that part A of the assessment. And the puff pastry, which I've got here, is going to be the next lesson back. So I think I had discussed or had mentioned about this black spot. And you can see with this puff pastry dough, and this is just the dough, you can see where there's some discoloration, right? And this is these black spot is not actually anything harmful. It's actually, I'm starting to make sourdough. So if you give it like if I could transfer over smell, it actually starts to smell cultured, right? So a bit like cheese, cultured cheese, cultured butter, cultured yogurt. So if I'm on the dough sheeter, I've got my block of dough, and again, just respect the rectangle. Just doing that dusting technique again, over, flipping it over, and I'll run this through the sheeter, and I'm going to roll this through. And this now, what I'm doing now is this is incorporating the fat, and this is that method where I was talking, where we were discussing French method, English method, Scotch method. They're all methods of how do I get this fat into the dough, right? After that, it's just lamination. So we're using the English method. It's also called the sheeting method. So I want to get this sheet of dough 3/4 of the size of the butter block. So that's, you can't see the full length. I'm using the laptop for this. So I've got my sheet of dough. And now I'm using this butter sheet. This is technical butter. You can see here, performance butter, MP35 frozen. It has 82% fat, made from cow milk. This is imported from the Netherlands. It has, we call it technical butter as well. It has had the lowest melting crystal removed, and it's also cultured. So it's got a nice smell. And at the moment, you can see this butter sheet is not flexible. It's not pliable. And if we're blending things together, as I mentioned, emulsion, and when we're blending two things together, they have to be compatible. Now, they're both compatible in temperature, but at the moment, they're not compatible as a material. So running through this at 15. And I'm going to roll this butter sheet until it becomes pliable. So now I've got the size, meaning the width of flour. And now I just need the actual length. And you can also see too that this butter sheet is now becoming a little bit more flexible. And it has to be flexible and pliable then to join this dough and make these fine sheets of butter and fat. Okay, now I've got this nice flexible sheet of butter. And now I'm going to incorporate this into this puff pastry dough. Everything's cold, and this is the first step of making butter puff pastry. So, got the dough. I place the fat on top, and I position that, meaning I'm going to stretch the pastry, and I'm going to join it to the dough. Make sure it's anchored in. And now I take the tail of the pastry and I join it halfway. Right, so it's halfway between that last section, and then I'm going to fold it over again. So this section now gets folded over. Flatten it out. Section off so that you can see exactly what's happening on the inside. Because everything about puff pastry is about what's happening on the inside. So you can see I've got a layer of butter evenly distributed through this dough. And now I'm going to, and I rolled that pastry this way, folded it, and now I'm going to turn that pastry. This is the mouth. Remember the smiley face. And now I'm going to start lamination. So that method has now been completed, right? Lamination is lamination. Those different methods are just about how do I get the fat into the dough. So incorporate that scrap. And this is what we used on the pies for the lesson last week. And see how I'm using my hand. This is fairly standard. This is a technique that we use, a little bit like doing CPR. So be able to use this hand to force that one down. Lift the gate all the way to 30. And now I'm going to do a puff pastry turn. Now, starting at 30, going to go down nice and easy. 25, 20, coming back at 15, dusting again. I'm going to turn it over. Now I've got to get this long enough that I can get turns into this pastry. This is half butter puff pastry. I'll explain that when we look at the slides, what that is. I've got to get it long enough that I can do that. Right. So now I've got this quite large, see there, large sheet. Now I'm going to cut again, just so we can see now what that looks like. And I'm going to do a turn. This is called a half turn. And for half puff pastry, I need to do this 5 times. So the amount of fat relates to the amount of turning that we're going to do. So now I've rolled it this way, right? I fold it over into a parcel, and again, I turn it around. There's the mouth, and I turn that around, and I'm going to roll now in this direction. So essentially, I'm rolling that way, that way, that way, that way, stretching the gluten in different ways evenly so it doesn't shrink. Same thing again, same process again, and just flatten it out. So I have completed one half turn. Now I'm going to do another one. Back at 30 again using that technique of dusting, over, always dust. At no point should the puff pastry not be able to move on either the bench surface or the dough sheet. 30, 35, 15, down to 12. And because I'm doing these turns, I'm going to flip it over. Flour. Because I've already turned this, you'll see that this pastry also needs to be rolled through a few times at that setting for it to remember the thickness. So it shrinks, right? Because it's gluten. Right, I'm going to roll it through on the same size sheet. Cut it again. This is now completing 2 half turns. And you can see now that I've got many layers, right? I can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But essentially, I'm going to turn it again. Those 8 layers are now timed by 3, and they're 24 layers. If I turn it again, which is my intention, I'm going to do this 5 times, and it's mathematics. The layering will dramatically increase. And the idea of puff pastry is I have fine layers of fat and dough. Turn this over. I'm always incorporating those cut pieces, so I cut this in half. See how I place that evenly, right? So there's no area in this puff pastry actually that does not have layers of fat and dough. So that's now had 2 half turns. Now I have to rest this now for 20 minutes. So between each series of folds, and it's normally 2 folds, 20 minutes rest, 2 folds, 20 minutes rest, 1 fold, half an hour rest, and then pin it out, right? And when I'm doing this, the puff pastry must be kept in the cool room or in the fridge. It's got to be kept cold, and it has to be covered, right? The pastry needs to remain pliable. Just going to share that PowerPoint now. So that first lesson back, puff pastry, we're doing English method. That's what I just demonstrated to you then. We've got a few products that we'll be making from that. This will be lesson 4. Okay, so not next week. This week is your assessment. This is the first week back. So we have here the 2 methods of incorporating butter, fat, into our dough. There is 2 ways of getting that through: spotting and sheeting. Within those methods, we have the English method, we have the French method, we've got the Scottish method. There's also the Japanese, there's the Spanish method. There's lots of cultural connections on how to get the fat into the dough. Essentially, they either go in as a sheet, like I just showed you, or it's spotted through like it would be rough puff. It is essential that those 2 materials, the fat and the dough, are consistent with temperature, and then also consistent with consistency. So they both have to be pliable and they both have to be cold. We have to rest puff pastry. When we're turning this, we're working gluten. Gluten has a memory, gluten will shrink. We must rest this pastry prior to sheeting and assembly. You'll see in that lesson, we need to incorporate some things in between, because we have all these periods where we are waiting for that to come, for that pastry to stay cold, to stay pliable, and to sheet correctly without shrinkage. We are going to be producing out of this puff pastry some vol au vents or bouchées, palmiers, matches, and also some pie tops. And I'll show you some images of exactly what we're doing. It's a similar setup to the assessment part A, is we will be producing pastry for the final assessment, because doing good puff pastry cannot do that process in 6 hours. You can do that process in 6 hours, but I'm trying to pass over good pastry chef skills and knowledge, and it really should be something that is produced over a period of time. So I might, again, make the dough so it's cold and relaxed, but we will still prepare the dough then for the following week's lesson. You've got there the different methods, the French and the English. I'm showing the English. I will also demonstrate probably week 5, the French method. All right. Important points. And again, I'll just talk about these. You know, this is locked in, right? This is a pastry chef process that you can't change, right? So the dough must be cold. I recommend using ice water, where you get your water out of the tap, or I might make a big ice slurry, but we need to chill that water to get it as cold as we can. The pastry also needs to be kept cold after manufacturing. Dough and laminating must be the same consistency, and that's what I'm talking about with butter and butter or fat, whatever fat we're using, and the dough, they have to be compatible. The right amount of turns. I have to get the right amount of layers of fat and dough, and this is related to the amount of fat to flour, right? So let me just, and I explained a little bit of this last week, 100% flour to fat is what we call full puff pastry. 3/4 puff pastry is 100% flour to 750 grams of fat, or 3/4. Half puff is 100% flour to 50% fat. Okay, so they're the 3 basic types of puff pastry types. And of course, they're related to the types of products that we make. Right amount of turns, cross pinning. I showed you that on that demonstration. You've got to turn that block around. The mouth has to always face the feed or where you're rolling that pastry. Dusting, resting, and really importantly too, making sure those layers are sealed. So you don't overdust. It's got to be, and I didn't probably show that, but you need to brush off any excess flour when you're actually folding your pastry together to then do another turn. Puff pastry needs a final resting time, really half an hour, 20 minutes is the absolute minimum. We will use docking to reduce shrinkage on puff pastry. We practice that with shortbread. The dock has a way of reducing lift and also giving it a lot of little pressure, you know, relaxant points where the pastry can shrink to, so it reduces shrinkage. I'll cover the egg washing and the baking when we're actually doing that in a practical sense. You've got the puff pastry layers, you can see there. You know, that first turn I got 8, not 7, so I'll probably get a little bit more efficient. And you can see how that then, you know, very quickly progresses up to 1,459 layers of individual layers of fat and dough. This is the recipe that we'll be using. The only difference is that we will be using 1 kilo of flour. Okay, the 500-gram block is a little bit small for the sheeters. 1 kilo block is a good block size for training. This block that I'm doing here is 5 kilos. Lamination using a dough sheeter, that's how we're making puff pastry. We're not doing it by hand. We're using the industry type of machinery that is designed for that. So you can see, and I'll have these slides up on the board. This resource is also on that team site where you can actually grab the PowerPoint, which I recommend. I recommend if you're serious about your training, you probably download everything that's on that team site. It's all got very useful and valued training and education. And this is the French method. So the method prior, this is an example of rough puff spotting. You can see on that, the photos there of the spots of fat that's in that dough. This pastry has the least amount of lift, right? They call it rough puff because it's rough. This is the French method. I will demonstrate that. You can see that it fits into that sheeting method because we've got a ball, and then we put the sheet of fat into the dough, and then we make a parcel, and then we start rolling. And this is what I just completed. This was part of that demonstration. You got the English method of making puff pastry, rolled the sheet. You can see there that the dough is folded over halfway. On the bottom bottom left-hand side. On the top, that's just the dough and the fat. I've rolled the sheet on the bottom left-hand side to be 3/4 of the size of the dough sheet. That's then folded over in half and then over again. And then you've got this nice U shape of fat and dough. Chicken filling, I'm going to change that. That tastes pretty... actually, no, this one is good. I have already changed this recipe. The last one was pretty ordinary. So this one is basically like a chicken pie, right? Palmiers, I'll demonstrate that. And phyllo pastry, these will be in the assessment. Okay, so the phyllo and the puff pastry, this is in the assessment. A bit of a look at the theory, because we've also got choux pastry, which is a new subject for us as well. And on the next session, I'm going to cover some of these points: choux pastry, food hygiene, gelatine, what it is, how to bloom it, citric acid, meringues, cream stabilizers, and of course, we need to work towards our next workflow for the next assessment. For this assessment that we're going to do, not the one this week, but certainly the final assessment for pastry, I want workflows. Okay, so I'll be handing out that document and we will start programming out and working out how we're going to do that. Just going to share another... Stop sharing. I'm going to just stop presenting. And if I can, I want the theory one. Share that. Okay, just quickly, just wanted to share this part. Assessment. You can see here what is required for this assessment. We've got a very happy student there, and we've got 3 products, which you can see on the bottom left-hand side is just a grab out of our books: 12 apple pies, 12 fruit tartlets, and 12 assorted quiche. You can see on the top the savoury paste, but you'll be making the shortbread. And there's examples there on the right-hand side up the top of the fruit flans, of the apple pies. They're presented by this student on small platters. I think for the first one, we're just going to stick to a wire, and then we'll work towards just being a little bit more, a bit more fancy, which is patisserie, a bit more finesse. And then we've got just a reminder, which I did cover in class in the theory. The first part, equipment, then weigh up. Make sure when you weigh up, it's in the sequence order of how you're going to build that pastry or how you're going to make that pastry. There's also a grab there of the whiteboard. I'll continue to do that. There's more information here. I'm going to cover that not now. This is long enough for you to have a look at. I did want to cover flour, where it comes from, a bit of flour technology, where it's grown, what it is. We need to dig a little bit deeper into the ingredient pools. Thank you very much. I'm going to call that. I will pass this on via a link and an email. I hope you check it out. and see you for the next 2 days. Good luck.